What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. So today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the AFC North, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys. So I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started. First off, with the Cincinnati Bengals. With the 17th pick in the first round, the Bengals go Shedeur Sanders, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. I have battled back and forth with how I truly feel about this pick. Ultimately, I do understand the process here. I gave this pick a B. It's still a little bit early than I would prefer to take Shedeur Sanders, who for me, I had as a first to a second round grade. And at the end of the day, if I'm a Bengals fan, I am terrified that this is Myles Murphy all over again. The big, heavy-handed edge rusher that's got power, but really not a whole lot of technique or anything else to his game, and really no production to bring to the table as he heads to the NFL. Just, 4 sacks over the last couple of years at Texas A&M. I don't think Shedeur Sanders enters the NFL as a very good football player, and that just terrifies me if I'm a Bengals fan and know what this defense looked like last year, knowing this was going to be a big draft to try and compete right away next year. And I do see Shedeur Sanders as a good bit of a project. We might not know for 2 or 3 years if this pick is going to be worth it, frankly, because there is just so much about his game that he has to develop. Really not much of a pass rush plan, a lack of counter moves. He has to get better breaking down when he does win in front of the quarterback so he doesn't miss so many tackles and sacks. But the reason this is a B, again, I did have a first to a second round grade on Shedeur Sanders. The upside is there. His traits are insane. And when he does win, you go oohing and awing. So the hope here is that he can be a hit, that the Bengals coaching staff can get the most out of Shedeur Sanders. The value isn't horrible, so I'm going to give this pick a B. Then as we go to the second round, I just want to say it really is amazing that every single year these Bengals draft grades look like this, where they just have their pick in every single round. They don't trade up, they don't go down, and they just take their guy every single round. It's really something else. You don't see that with any other team. Very emblematic, in my opinion, of their lack of innovation as a team that impacts the way they handle the salary cap and many other ways that I think holds this team back. But let's continue evaluating their draft. With the second pick, they go Demetrius Knight, linebacker out of South Carolina. Not a horrible pick, but I did ultimately give this pick a C. First of all, I do think this was just early. I had a third round grade on Demetrius Knight. A part of me does understand, it's a weak linebacker class. They felt they had to take a linebacker ahead of other teams, but that does come at the cost of reaching a little bit on a player if that's going to be your strategy. Demetrius Knight is an older prospect, played 6 years at South Carolina. Good linebacker prospect, not a great linebacker prospect. He definitely stood out ahead of this class as a guy that could potentially start in the league. But for an older prospect, he still has a lot to learn in terms of defending the run, taking on blocks, going through his run keys. And as a coverage defender, he's very up and down. I love that he's a former quarterback. He sees the game a special way, and there is certainly upside for him to be a starting linebacker in the NFL. But again, I do think there were better players out there and better players out there at other positions of need for the Bengals. I think in such a great D-line class, you could have tapped into the depth of that group, maybe gone with a defensive tackle like Darius Alexander, who goes about 15 picks later. Also would have loved a guy like Trey Amos, who had been falling in the draft at this point, that went a few picks later to the Washington Commanders. I think those are more valuable positions at positions of need and just better overall players. So this was definitely a pick that came off the board, and I was like, all right, I can see the reasoning for it, but a C grade feels right to me. I think this was a fine pick, but not one that I'm going to really bang the drum for on the Bengals either. And then unfortunately, I didn't like their third round pick really at all. Dylan Fairchild, a guard out of Georgia, just way too early in my opinion for what I saw in this player. Someone that is tough, does have that wrestling background, which you love, gives him solid core strength and toughness in the trenches, but someone that really struggled to keep his feet moving as a blocker. He fell off blocks consistently. He's a taller guard, so he struggles to get leverage, and I just thought he was rather uncoordinated, and there were a lot better guards in this draft. About 8 picks later, exactly 8 picks later, for example, the Jaguars selected Wyatt Milam, who I am projecting to be a much better guard at the next level than Dylan Fairchild. And I'm definitely a little scared, man. If they view him as a starting guard, which taking him at this spot, he's going to get a legitimate chance to come in and compete with Cordell Volson and Cody Ford and Lucas Patrick. If he's out there trying to protect Joe Burrow, a guy that, look, he stayed healthy last year, and I was stoked about that. You guys know I love Joe Burrow. It's part of why this pick concerns me, but we got to be real. He's been banged up throughout his career. To get a guy that I just don't see great pass protection from as a potential starter, when there's other guys that I really like, can't really endorse this pick either. So that one got a D for me at a 5th round grade on Dylan Fairchild. Then we get to day 3 of the draft, and geez, man, they take another linebacker. I was just not a fan of this pick, man. I think there were just so many other potential starters that had started to slip into the 4th round, whether it's a David Walker who went 2 picks later, double dip on the edge perhaps. Really talented running backs in this draft. A safety like Malachi Moore who goes a few picks later. You could have reunited him with his college teammate there in Jordan Battle. I would have loved that. Jalen Royals goes to the Chiefs. You could get even extra juice in the slot with a really talented player. The list goes on and on and on of guys that are going to help you win games in a way that Barrett Carter, who's going to be a backup linebacker now and a guy I project as a long-term backup without a lot of traits. I just am not a fan of this pick, especially after you already went linebacker in the 2nd round. Now, things do get better with their last couple of picks. I do like the dart throw on Jalen Rivers. I actually had a higher grade on him than I did on Fairchild, a guy that could be a tackle or a guard. Just kind of looks the part. The dude is super filled out. He's got crazy long arms. His good reps look dominant. It's just you got to find a way to get those good reps to happen more consistently. But I wouldn't be stunned if he actually ends up the better guard than Dylan Fairchild over time. So I did think that was a good pick. In fact, if they just took him in the 3rd round, I would have graded it a little bit better. So you could do a little mental gymnastics, but that's not how we maximize value and grade these drafts, by flipping picks in our minds like that. But then, in my opinion, the best value they got in this draft was that running back pick in the 6th round. While I was critical of them for not going with a top back in the 4th round, getting Taj Brooks in the 6th round is maximizing getting to draft inside a deep running back class. Taj Brooks is a really high floor back, reminds me a lot of someone like Devin Singletary, maybe a little bit of someone like Zach Moss, who I think I saw they brought back as well. Love him as a complement to Chase Brown, a really tough north and south runner with some shiftiness in between the tackles. He is good running inside in a way that Chase Brown sometimes does struggle with his vision and lack of total power. So really nice pick. And then they did make up a little bit of ground with some good undrafted free agent steals. They got their my highest rated lineman for them as an undrafted player, and you might say, well, you idiot, he went undrafted. Your evaluation just sucks. Most of the time, I would say, yeah, that's fair, but in the case of Seth McLaughlin, he falls undrafted because he is recovering from an ACL injury. He's not going to be available, most likely, for the Bengals in this upcoming season. If he is, it's going to be late, but I thought his tape was 4th round tape and certainly was worth it, in my opinion, for someone to take a D3 pick and use it on him. So to get him in a situation where you might be able to just put him on IR for a year, and then next year with Ted Karras not getting any younger, I could see him being your starting center in 2026, frankly. So that was really good. And then Caleb Etienne has just stupid measurables. I thought he should have been drafted. Getting another dart throw into this offensive line, where they're obviously trying to get younger, I like that as well. So overall, as you guys can tell, I wasn't a huge fan of the Bengals draft, unfortunately. I really hope I'm wrong, but this grade might end up the lowest graded draft that we discuss throughout these 8 divisional draft grades videos. A C- grade for the Bengals. Ultimately, I see some dart throws on the offensive line that you're hoping work out. You've hammered home at linebacker with some solid prospects. I think they got a good 1B type of back, being a great value there in a deep class. And then ultimately, what happens with Shedeur Sanders is going to be how the final grade ages over the next couple of years. If he hits his upside, this C- grade is going to look wrong at the end of the day. But let's buckle up and talk about this Cleveland Browns draft, who were certainly stealing the headlines throughout the entire weekend, not just trading down from having the opportunity to draft Travis Hunter with the 2nd pick, but then ending up with Shedeur Sanders in the 5th pick. So a lot to discuss here for the Browns. Let's start with that trade down, opting not to take Travis Hunter and then ending up with a haul. You get the Jags pick at the top of the 2nd that they end up using on Quinshon Judkins. You obviously get the Jags pick that they get Mason Graham, and then they get a 1st-round pick next year, and that is a critical thing to remember as we talk about this draft and as we get to the Shedeur Sanders analysis here. But I actually can fully get behind the Browns' decision to trade down and not take Travis Hunter. That Deshaun Watson move has put them in such a tough spot. Cap-wise, they don't have money to fill out their roster in free agency, and pick-wise, they haven't had a 1st-round pick for 3 years. This essentially allows you to make up that ground. You effectively get 2 extra 1st-round picks in that trade down. I think if they also looked at their team and said, you know what, we actually have a pretty deep cornerback room, if they believe in those guys to play better after a down year last year, I can't blame them for that. And taking Travis Hunter to just be a wide receiver when this trade down is on the board makes total sense. So I can get behind the trade down, and I absolutely can get behind who they took with the 5th overall pick, Mason Graham. Really excited to see that the rumors that he might fall were false, and to see him go where he belongs inside the top 5 of the draft, certainly inside the top 10. Really talented defensive tackle, a lot of ways he can win as a rusher. I think, I heard people say he can't win with the bull rush. I disagree. Plenty of times we see Mason Graham get up and under a guy's pads and take him for a ride towards the quarterback. But the lateral agility from this player as a defensive tackle is just nasty. The way he can bend, beat you left and right. He's so good with his hands. He plays in a way that his length doesn't really impact him too much. And he's really good against the run too. So love getting him as a Robin to Myles Garrett being the Batman there. If there was a knock on Mason Graham, yeah, he's a little smaller. He does have shorter arms. Maybe he's never going to be a true superstar, but he can absolutely be a star and a great number 2 with Myles Garrett back for the long haul here. So a great way to kickstart the trade down. And then at the top of the 2nd round, they take Carson Schwessinger. Really enjoyed Schwessinger's tape. Wouldn't have been stunned if he went in the 1st round in a horrible linebacker class. I think this is a great pick for the Browns. There's a lot of conversation about, just how long is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah going to be available for this team as injuries just continue to stack up for him, which was his concern coming out of Notre Dame. But even if JOK is able to stick around, Schwessinger is a great player to put next to him, someone with size that is a very rangy coverage defender. Not that JOK isn't, but they do so much with JOK as a blitzer and manning up guys towards the sideline. Schwessinger gives you more of a hook curl guy with more of that zone IQ and ability to take stuff away over the middle of the field so you can do all this other stuff with JOK as well. The one thing with Schwessinger is he is extremely hot and cold as a run defender, and you're probably going to get some ups and downs as he hopefully learns that. It seems he has bulked up heading out of UCLA and into the draft, so hopefully that will allow him to take on blocks better, and he's going to, he's only started 1 year as a walk-on at UCLA, but that doesn't mean he isn't incredibly athletic like a lot of walk-ons often are. But definitely a lot of, lacking time on task for him to, get up to speed with a lot of the run defense stuff and the read keys and all that stuff. But overall, really good pick, good value. Gave that pick an A. And then I'm a huge Quinshon Judkins fan, you guys. Loved seeing the Browns get him, keeping him in the state of Ohio. He ended up my 37th player on my big board. Really fun to see him go just before that 36th I just think he was an under-discussed player, really a draft win for me, if you will, to see him go ahead of Travion Henderson, who I thought was getting all of the buzz out of that running back room, and I thought Quinshon Judkins was the real 3-down back out of that backfield. I think you can make a case Judkins has the best or second best vision in this draft, the way he presses the hole, the way he can run any type of run scheme in Kevin Stefanski's diverse run game. Really, really love this. I think he's going to be a true 3-down back and a potential superstar for the Browns. I think his upside gets sold short quite a bit. So the first 3 picks are phenomenal. And then one of my favorite players in this draft in the 3rd round, another top 50 player for me, Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. At this point during the draft, I was just glowing about what the Browns had done, not just the value and the players they were getting, but this idea that they are bulking up this roster and positioning themselves with 2 first-round picks next year to draft a quarterback. I think up to this point, that was the clear strategy, and to get Harold Fannin into the mix here makes so much sense. Fannin is at his best, either as a number 2 tight end, as a flex player. Think about guys like Jonnu Smith or Gerald Everett, some that you don't necessarily need to put in line or want to put in line because he's about 240 pounds, 6'3", doesn't have the play strength to do that in the way that they do with David Njoku, who's an underrated blocker at times. Well, the Browns do love 12 personnel, and he's going to be able to do that here. And additionally, Harold Fannin has extended use as a legitimate slot wide receiver, where I look at the Browns and they don't really have a true slot guy. Jerry Jeudy moves all over the place. Tillman's an X on the outside. And you got Jamari Thrash, DeAndre Carter. Looks like Elijah Moore's gone at this point. But I think Harold Fannin is going to get a ton of play as a slot wide receiver. Think about like Cooper Kupp in kind of a Shanahan, McVay style offense, or Jawan Jennings' role for the Niners. That is absolutely an application for Harold Fannin. Just calling him a tight end short sells his abilities. And I was excited to see if he was going to go to a system like this that could properly use his skill set. And I do think that Stefanski's offense is the perfect fit for Harold Fannin. So the fit is tremendous and the value is tremendous. He was inside the top 50 of my big board. I had a true 2nd round grade on him. He goes at the top of the 3rd. I am very excited to see what he's going to do. But this is where the conversation gets a little bit wacky. So they take Dillon Gabriel at the back end of the 3rd round. And this to me made everything we had said during the live stream and have said in this video so far. Look, they are gearing up to draft a quarterback next year, and I think the Dillon Gabriel pick is very consistent with that strategy. Do the Browns want to just completely suck this year? No, of course not. Stefanski is still coaching for his job. I think Andrew Berry is GMing for his job as well. They don't want to just completely suck, but they also want to build this team the right way. They understand there's a lot of upside in next year's quarterback draft, and they want to be in a position to be able to move off of the quarterback that's playing for them this year. And Dillon Gabriel at the ass end of the 3rd round is the perfect pick for them at that point in time, right? 24-year-old QB, 2nd all-time passing yards guy, played in various systems throughout his time in college. Really a high floor, low ceiling QB that can come in and compete for the starting job, allow you to evaluate your players like Harold Fannin, Quinshon Judkins, have a serviceable offense, not put too much pressure on your defense. Really the perfect point guard to come in, run Stefanski's offense, and then you can position yourself next year. Nobody is going to blame you if Dillon Gabriel plays like the 27th best quarterback in football and you go take a guy in the 1st round next year. I thought that pick was perfect for them. However, you cannot talk about this pick without talking about what happened in the 5th round of this draft. And we're gonna circle back to Dylan Sampson here, but I want to just piggyback off of that and continue this QB conversation here for Cleveland, because ultimately I'm not a fan of the Shedeur Sanders pick. I think it's an ultimate eyesore on what Andrew Berry was trying to accomplish, and I think you see both Stefanski and Andrew Berry's reaction when they make this pick, plus everything I've said about everything making sense up until this point about how they wanted to go about this build, how they wanted to approach the quarterback situation, pick after pick after pick. They made it very clear they did not want Shedeur Sanders. This is my opinion. Everybody's going to have an opinion on it, and you're allowed to disagree, but I'm going to be honest. This is how I view this. Ownership stepped in, said, enough of this. Go get Shedeur Sanders. This is ridiculous. He's going to sell tickets. This is going to create buzz. Jimmy Haslam, am putting an end to this right now. And that was the end of their draft. They gave up their 2 remaining picks to go up and make this. And to me, everything falls flat at that point. Not that this draft is a complete wash, but I think this puts the Browns in a very complicated spot. And I'm going to throw out all of the noise, all of the Shedeur Sanders noise. I'm going to let everything we said on the live stream about it. There's so much discussion about, how he approached the pre-draft process and all of that. As I analyze this pick, forget all of that for a second. I just want to talk about what this means for the Browns from a football perspective. The reason I believe, and again, this is my opinion, you're allowed to disagree with this, but the reason I believe they passed on Shedeur Sanders time and time again was that they viewed him like myself and I think any draft analyst or 98% of everybody that came to an opinion on Shedeur Sanders, he is a high floor, low ceiling quarterback prospect. Someone that, yes, can probably come in and be a starter, but with a guy that's not that athletic, that doesn't throw with a ton of anticipation, that has questionable pocket presence at time and took a bunch of bad sacks and doesn't have the strongest arm, realistically, your best case scenario is if everything goes right, he could be like a Brock Purdy or something like that. One of those QBs that, yes, is a starter in the league, but is someone that really needs everything to be perfect around them, and the second they become expensive, things get really, really, really hard. I think the Browns saw him like that and said, you know what? No, let's load up on great players, a first rounder next year, build up the core of this team, and position ourselves to get someone with a rocket arm that's crazy athletic, someone that could be more of a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback for us in the future. And this pick, strictly from a football perspective, puts all of that strategy into question. And the reason I say that is out of respect for Shedeur Sanders, at who he is as a quarterback, that I do think he wins that starting job, that I do think he plays okay, like the 23rd or 24th best quarterback in the league, that you do get to next year and he actually helps you win a decent amount of games so that you're not picking super high. But above all, he plays well enough that you get there to next year. For an owner that, in my opinion, stepped in and made this his guy, it is going to make it damn impossible to not stick with Shedeur Sanders. And again, we don't know who those guys are going to be next year, who's going to be on the board, but there's a lot of names. Whether it's Arch Manning or Drew Aller, Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik. And the reality is, look at the last 4 or 5 drafts, the Jaden Daniels, the Cam Wards, the Joe Burrows. Those guys were never viewed as like likely top 3 picks heading into the year either. So there's already some guys at the top, and you never know who's going to emerge through the woodworks as well, as we've seen through the college landscape. But at the end of the day, I think this pick makes it extremely unlikely that the Browns are going to be able to fulfill the strategy that Andrew Berry set in place a day ago. And this, to me, again, just my opinion, completely reeks of ownership meddling, not allowing who is, in my opinion, a brilliant general manager to cook and do his thing and do this rebuild the right way. We know how hard it is to get over the hump when you don't have one of those dudes at QB. And I firmly believe that Shedeur Sanders does not have the upside to be one of those top 8 to 10 quarterbacks. But it's hand in hand because I do think he's a solid player that's going to carve out a, starting position here in Cleveland. But it just was kind of a buzzkill for me on what Cleveland was trying to do. It was yet another reminder after a season that was flooded with teams that reminded us how much ownership matters in this sport. It was yet another time where the Browns come in and say, no, it's got to be Johnny Manziel. No, we need Deshaun Watson. It just reeks of that all over again in Cleveland. Just my opinion. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on if you agree with that or not. But it does make grading this Browns draft, as we get back to the discussion here, extremely difficult when that is my opinion on it. But we still got to talk about Dylan Sampson, who does go in the 4th round. Really nice pick. I really like how he pairs with Quinshon Judkins, especially if he can ramp up what he's able to do in the receiving game as more of that lightning to Quinshon Judkins thunder, if you will. Someone that can come in and have some of those explosive runs. But that's not really what Dylan Sampson's tape told you, even though he's this 5'10", 205-pound back that ran a 4.4. His tape was actually more of like a J.K. Dobbins type of back, where he's actually kind of shifty in a phone booth and has excellent vision. He's got good burst into the hole. Honestly, his tape was like kind of a reduced version of Quinshon Judkins. So whatever he ends up being, whether he turns into more of an explosive back as a lightning to the thunder, or if he just kind of is what he was at Tennessee, which resulted in me giving him a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him, I think just retooling that running back room. And I totally understand them dealing with Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong over the last year or so. Horrible vision backs, right? Like guys that can just always bounce runs outside, don't take what's there. Stefanski draws up the run game and they watch back the tape and he's just like pulling his hair out like, dude, I love that you can run for 80-yard touchdowns, but hit the damn hole. Like getting 2 backs that will do that for you consistently and just replenishing that running back room in a great running back class, can't argue with it. So at the end of the day, this is going to be quite possibly the hardest draft to contextualize and slap a letter grade on, not just because of the whole quarterback dialogue, but the fact that on top of that, they kind of freaking crushed it, right? I was really tempted to just say NA and not give this draft a grade because I think ownership stepped in and really just threw off everything they were trying to accomplish. But I thought it was better to just acknowledge that there was an organizational error, in my opinion, on top of a bunch of really phenomenal picks by Andrew Berry. And I do love the trade down on top of that. So I am going to give this ultimately a B grade, but, that's kind of with an asterisk, right? With the very, very unique conversation as it relates to this situation. All right, next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who unfortunately, we got another kind of interesting conversation to have about one of these picks, but let's start with their number 1 pick. Malachi Starks falls to them at pick 27, a pick I got right in my latest mock draft. I thought it was possible that Starks could fall because of the position he plays. A lot of teams just don't value taking safety this early, but the player was obviously just too damn good to pass up at this point. Starks was inside my top 20 players in this draft. And just like I said in that mock draft, not only a great value to see him kind of start slipping to you at 27, but the scheme fit and how he fits this Ravens defense is just so fantastic. Look, the Ravens have been at their best when they can take Kyle Hamilton and use him as that kind of positionless star defender, star by definition of the position, not because he's a star. We all know Kyle Hamilton's a superstar, but the star position being that big nickel back, whether it's a weak side linebacker or a slot corner or a strong safety, just being in that part of the field is where Kyle Hamilton does all of the stuff that he's so sensational at as a blitzer, swatting balls down towards the flat, blowing up screens, using his length to pick off balls over the middle of the field. That's where he's at his best. But with what's happened over the last couple of years, they've had to use Kyle Hamilton more as a deep safety. He's been okay at it, but you haven't felt him making that elite impact on games like he did out the gate in his rookie season. Drafting Malachi Starks allows them to get right back to that. And not only does it allow you to play the style of defense that they are best at, in my opinion, but it also indirectly addresses your cornerback needs. Because when you're playing 3 safety packages, Kyle Hamilton is effectively replacing your slot corner in those spots. So you can play Humphrey and Wiggins on the outside. You're going to be able to reduce the amount of snaps that someone like Chidobe Awuzie, who they signed in free agency, who has a really hard time staying healthy, but you're able to reduce his snap count so that when he's out there, he's getting valuable, impactful snaps and reducing his exposure to injury. It just makes so much sense for the scheme they run and how this roster is currently built. But dude, on top of all that, Malachi Starks is just freaking awesome. He's going to be able to, ball hawk on the back end. He'll contribute against the run. He loves to come downhill and tackle. He even adds some extra flexibility. If you want just better man-to-man coverage from the nickel, you could use Malachi Starks as more of a nickel defender and put Kyle Hamilton deep, where again, he's not bad. There's just so much different stuff you can do with him. And then for the long haul, Adarius Washington, undrafted free agent, had a good year last year. We'll see if he can repeat what he does and earn a contract extension heading into the final year of his deal. But if he doesn't, you're drafting a solution there as well. The value, the flexibility that this provides, this Ravens defense is just tremendous. I love everything about this pick. It is an A+ pick, a perfect pick, in my opinion, for the Ravens at pick 27. And then we get to the Mike Green pick with the 27th pick in the second round. I just find the entire Mike Green conversation very difficult, but I am not afraid of shying away from the tough conversations that need to be had about this draft pick in a way that I think so many pundits out there just say, wow, great player. They got him at pick 27. Unbelievable, incredible steal. The Ravens did it again, without having the conversation about why the hell he was here to begin with the 27th pick. In my opinion, on the tape, yes, a top 10 player in this draft class at a position of value and a position of need, being edge for the Ravens. From a pure football perspective, how could you not say this is a glorified steal for the Baltimore Ravens? But that comes with a massive asterisk, a massive caveat. And in my opinion, in many ways, kind of selling your soul to the devil here. Mike Green, someone with multiple rape allegations, someone that went to Virginia with a no-nonsense clause because of a situation in high school. Another situation pops up with another girl at Virginia, and Virginia says, you're out of here. You're kicked out. He goes and plays his college ball at Marshall. Fortunately, nothing popped up there, and you could only pray that he has matured and those situations either didn't happen and or are behind him, right? Myself, I have heard some other things that do cross the line in terms of stuff I'm not willing to share and blow sources and that kind of stuff. But I've heard some very concerning things about Mike Green actively to this day that leads to him falling to the end of the second round. And now for the Baltimore Ravens, who still employ Justin Tucker, who is currently undergoing, I would say, an eerily familiar situation to what happened with Deshaun Watson, the Ravens are telling you who they are comfortable with, what they are comfortable with. The same team that had Ray Rice back in the day. It's a bad look for the Baltimore Ravens. It is. And I get it. Many people are going to be able to say, who cares? We're here to win football games, and that's what the Ravens themselves are saying. So that's why my grade is congrats, I guess, to you Ravens fans. Mike Green might be the piece that sets the Ravens, pun intended, over the edge. An edge rusher that they kind of desperately need, a group that lacks star talent off the edge to ramp up the pass rush, to allow these incredible players in the secondary to thrive. Yeah, the football fit speaks for itself. But I also think beyond ethical decisions and virtue signaling and all that stuff, I do think there is a concern that this is the type of human that might act up again. And if that happens, you're drafting a player that at any given moment might need to exit the league. So that needs to be acknowledged as well. And you're putting a guy in the locker room. How do you feel if you're Teddy Buchanan or Emory Jones or Malachi Starks and your locker's next to Mike Green? How does that feel, knowing that there's a pretty high likelihood that you're next to a racist? Controversial of me to say that, I understand. But that's the reality of the situation that leads to a top 10 player in this draft falling to the 27th pick in the draft. So I'm going to leave my analysis there and carry on with the rest of this Ravens draft. Emory Jones goes at pick 27 in the third round. Offensive lineman out of LSU. He played tackle at LSU. I did write him up as a tackle because he's got the length and the kind of physical profile to maybe play tackle. But to me, really slow feet, probably going to be best as a guard in the league, and the Ravens do have a need for some guard competition. So I think it was a good pick. I had him as more of an early day 3 value. Well, we're basically at early day 3, but still a little bit earlier than I prefer with Emory Jones, who's certainly more of a project, but I understand the pick. I think it was a good pick all in all, just not one that I'm going to really bang the drum for. Then we get into day 3. So at the back end of the 4th round, they take very much a developmental linebacker in Teddy Buchanan. A little bit earlier than I had him, but again, back end of the 4th round now in a weaker linebacker class. I have no issue with them taking him. He just is an older prospect that is very much behind the 8 ball in terms of where he's at with his linebacker tape. I was underwhelmed in both phases, both his zone IQ and his ability to break down the run and get in position to be an impact in that phase. Great linebacker coaches out there in Baltimore, though, and the traits are insane with him. So hopefully things can come along, and he's going to be in the mix in a room that has Trenton Simpson really listed as the starter right now, who they kind of benched last year. So we'll see. I think the upside is there. I think the pick was solid. I got really nothing negative to say about it, just not a ton of value there or anything crazy in my opinion. But then I really like the Carson Vincent pick with the 3rd pick in the 5th round. Classic, kind of small school, traits-based developmental tackle prospect. Really a great spot for him to go. Sits behind Ronnie Stanley for an extended period of time. They gave Ronnie Stanley the extension, but with his injury record, we don't know just how long he's going to be around. Vincent's a guy with the length and movement skills and tape against his level of competition to make you think, all right, this guy could really have starting left tackle potential if with the right coaching that he very likely wasn't getting at Alabama A&M. The technique can come along and he can be a player for you. So I think that was a great pick. And then I want to kind of lump a pair of these picks together because the Ravens had a million 6th and 7th round picks here. I want to lump Bilal Cohn and Robert Longerbeam together here. I think they got this right. Bilal Cohn, as an early 6th rounder, I had him as an early day 3 type of guy, just your classic traits-based developmental cornerback prospect. Needs to improve his zone skills and his anticipation, but has the ability to run man coverage, and this was a great range for him to go. And then you pair that with Robert Longerbeam, who had a lot of production at Rutgers, but needed to go to like an off-zone system as an outside corner. He's a little bit slender to play in the nickel, but as someone with the ball skills, the ability to play a lot of quarters and similar style coverages to what the Ravens run here, really good fit as well. Both these guys have a ton of athleticism and starting potential if things go right. I'm just always a fan of the double dip strategy because you can never be so full of yourself that you know exactly what you're talking about with these guys coming out. And I try to be conscientious of that myself when I do these draft grades from my end as well. But to do the double dip strategy to say, well, the probability that one guy works out is pretty small in this range, but you take 2 kind of similar concepts, package it together, the probability doubles. So I really like that. And then they do take the kicker. The virtue signaling pick here out of Arizona, solid enough pick, I suppose. I don't do kickers. I don't have time to get around to that. Rookie kickers are such a crapshoot anyway. But if you're going to take one, 6th round adds up to me. Solid pick in my opinion. Then they take a kick returner in my opinion out in LeJontay Webster out of Colorado. There's a world where he surprises as an actual receiver. He does run good routes, but the dude's just tiny at like 160 pounds. But, Devin Duvernay was a great return man for them. He's no longer with them. So I understand the Webster pick. Very solid, very adequate. But one of the biggest steals in the 6th or 7th round in this entire draft, in my opinion, was Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech. And what a steal for the Ravens, who I think needed at that point in the draft to find some more interior D-line help. Outside of Madubuike and Travis Jones and Broderick Washington, it is all like practice squad developmental depth right now. I think Aeneas Peebles, who I had a 3rd round grade on, is a really nice pass rusher coming out. Not the biggest guy, not the traitsiest guy, but someone that wins with a vast variety of quick hitting pass rush moves on the inside. Someone that does have a little bit of power in there as well. I think there's a very realistic situation where they get to training camp and realize, damn, Aeneas Peebles is the 2nd best interior rusher on this football team. And we see him come in a lot on 3rd downs and help them get after the quarterback and make an impact. As a late 6th round pick, this was a tremendous steal. Peebles fell through the cracks, in my opinion, in a very deep interior defensive line class, so I love that. And then they go Garrett Dellinger at the end of the 7th round. That's about where I had him 6th, 7th round pick as a backup guard. Not great feet and just not great tape overall, but does have a lot of power in his upper half. Someone that maybe could be useful depth throughout the course of his rookie season, or just doesn't make the team entirely. They did have one undrafted free agent that stood out to me as well, Chandler Martin as a linebacker. Not the biggest guy, played against a lower level of competition, but a lot of speed, flies to the ball, a lot of production at Memphis. Definitely a guy I thought should have been drafted right around the range, frankly, that Teddy Buchanan did. So like that pick, those two guys were actually my number 9 and number 10 linebackers, respectively, with Buchanan ahead of Martin. So very nice value there. Obviously a sensitive subject with the Mike Green thing, but realistically from a football point of view, this is yet another phenomenal Baltimore Ravens draft, especially if Aeneas Peebles is who I think he is, to give them even more to the pass rush on top of adding Mike Green. I think that secondary fills out super nicely with Starks and a pair of interesting developmental corners, as Marlon Humphrey's not getting any younger out there. He's not. But on top of that, they just don't have a lot of cornerback depth after Humphrey and Wiggins that you see as reliable long-term options. So I think that was a really nice strategy on day 3 as well. And then, hey, maybe Carson Vincent hits, which would make this a legacy draft potentially for the Ravens if everything goes right. So a lot of picks. I think they really did a good job with them, and really no picks that I had much to criticize. I mean, really the only thing was like Emory Jones went a little bit earlier than I had him, but pretty damn nitpicky there. This is an A grade that I am going to just not go A+, because it just feels gross with the Mike Green situation. And that's just how I want to handle it. If you got an issue with that, that's your own prerogative. I understand. But let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers to wrap up the AFC North. Less picks for them, but a lot of good picks in here as well. Derek Harmon made so much sense with that 21st pick. It's a mock draft spot that myself and many have had Derek Harmon landing in Pittsburgh as your long-term Cam Hayward replacement, but someone that's going to come in and contribute right away. They did lose Larry Ogunjobi. He goes to the Bills, so you have about 500 snaps getting vacated. Now, I was excited to see a fair share of those now go to Keanu Benton, but obviously all of those weren't going to go to him either. This is a team that will line up in a 5-man front to get after the quarterback, and you can now line up with Watt and Highsmith on the outside with Harmon, Hayward, and Benton. Are you kidding me? Good luck blocking all 5 of those guys, all getting one-on-ones for the most part. Just pretty damn crazy. And then, of course, Harmon can play in so many of their base kind of 3-4 packages as well as a really nice base end. And if he shows up and defends the run like he did in college at the NFL level, you can give Cam Hayward a breather and, at his age, keep him fresh and keep him healthy as you hope to make a playoff run. And by the way, I am definitely under the opinion here that they feel very good that Aaron Rodgers is going to be their quarterback, seeing how they let this draft play out, with various spots where QBs were on the table for them to draft. And I think as we get to the Will Howard pick as well, he makes sense as a developmental piece behind Rodgers. But then in the 3rd round, they get Caleb Johnson, just the most perfect of fits for the Steelers from a value perspective, and for Caleb Johnson from a scheme fit and team fit perspective, just in terms of like everything lining up and making so much sense. This was one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. And, I pushed back on a lot of the top 50 buzz on Caleb Johnson. I know when I dropped my running backs rankings video back, I think late February, and Caleb was my RB5 with a 2nd to a 3rd round grade. A lot of people were disappointed in me, saying I was too low on Caleb Johnson. He ends up going much more in that range. But what I did say about Caleb Johnson, and the reason I was a little bit lower on him as a total grade, is he was going to be much more of a scheme fit specific player. He has some of the worst acceleration out of any running back in this draft, which means he is really only at his best as a wide zone runner, where he gets a few steps to get that build up speed, let blocks set up, and then have that building rounding speed to either turn the corner or just hit the hole at full speed. Well, he now goes to run for Arthur Smith, who smashes wide zone like Falcon Punch in Smash Bros. Like, it is all almost exclusively wide zone in Pittsburgh, and what a fit from that perspective. I do think now into the middle of the third round, he had become a value, and I wouldn't be surprised for the Pittsburgh Steelers if Caleb Johnson was inside the top 30 or 40 players on their total big board because he was such a great scheme fit. So for a team that traded their second round pick for DK Metcalf, and I don't factor in, previous draft pick trades and stuff. We've analyzed that in different contexts. We're just analyzing what picks they had heading into draft weekend for this exercise. But considering they didn't have a second round pick to theoretically, like they were going to run the risk basically of not getting one of these star potential backs, Caleb Johnson was going to be one of those guys if they were, say, picking 55th in the draft or wherever it was going to be. And they're able to land him in the third round because he was more of a scheme-specific player and not going to be for everybody. But obviously, giving that one an A-plus grade for everything we said about it. Let's go to day 3 here. So they take Jack Sawyer towards the end of the 4th round. I've seen some people go overboard, freaking out about, oh my God, how did they get Jack Sawyer? It wasn't that surprising in a tremendously deep edge class for him to be there at this point. But I did have a third-round grade on Sawyer, and this is a really good value for where they got him. Look, the people saying TJ Watt comparisons, or even comparing him to what Herbig has been as a pass rusher, or say Alex Highsmith, the Steelers have such a great record with drafting edge rushers around this territory. He's not quite those guys. He doesn't have this tremendous pass rushing upside in the way that someone especially like Alex Highsmith had. And I think Herbig always had some pretty crazy upside too. We loved that pick. But what Sawyer is going to be able to do for them is fill that Preston Smith role that the Steelers obviously put a lot of stock in. They traded to bring him over from Green Bay. Just another guy in that edge room that can eat up snaps, defend the run, and help them get to those third down rush packages where you can have Highsmith and TJ Watt teeing off on dudes fresh because they didn't have to necessarily play their ass off 60, 65 snaps a game because of the existence of a Jack Sawyer or a Preston Smith. It's not to say Sawyer can't rush the passer. It's just, I don't know that the way he wins is going to translate all that well against NFL tackles. He's very savvy with his hand. He's got decent bend, but he's not really like this knockback power rusher. He's not going to really threaten you with crazy speed or this immense level of inside counters because he doesn't have that huge threat with the speed to get tackles to set wide that can set up those inside counters. So more of a savvy rusher than an efficient, dominant rusher, in my opinion. But again, for what he is, for where they got him, it's a great pick. The only pick that the Steelers made that I wish they would have gone in a different direction was Yahya Black. Not that the value's horrible. I think it gives you a chance at more of a nose tackle presence. I didn't think his tape was so great that it's like, oh my God, yeah, he's a plug-and-play dominant nose tackle right away. He's got to learn to keep his pads down if he's going to play that role and take on double teams. As an ISO'd run defender, he did some good stuff. That's, again, if his 6th round grade as an early down run defender is where I had him. But at this stage in the draft, they had ignored their secondary, which I think was a mistake. I think whether you go with someone that really fell, in my opinion, in Dorian Strong, who went about 20 picks later, or taking a dart throw somewhere earlier on, maybe one of those Ravens corners we talked about, whether it was cone or longer beam. Dante Kent in the 7th round was kind of their traits-based dart throw there. I do think there were cornerbacks that could have helped this team, especially like a Dorian Strong. Whereas, I don't know, I look at their depth chart at D tackle, and I don't know how, where Yahya Black really fits in right away. You got your top 3, and then you've also got Daniel Ekwale, you got Montravius Adams still around, Dean Lowry still on the team. I don't know that you necessarily had to go that route there, but, a little bit nitpicky, but the one pick that I was like, yeah, I would have gone a different direction. But then they go Will Howard with the top of the 6th round. I hinted at it earlier, but I think he's a really nice investment just to see what happens backing up, theoretically, Aaron Rodgers here. Howard's fascinating to me because he's got traits. I think his arm is pretty damn good. It's not a rocket arm or something that you would see from a big QB like this all the time, but I think he's got a better arm than like Mason Rudolph, for example, who's listed as their starter still. But he's surprisingly athletic. for how kind of big he is. But the interesting thing beyond the traits with Howard is just the fact that, you know, when the games mattered most and as he settled in at Ohio State, he actually had like incredible tape in the last few games of his season in that national championship run. Whereas you watch really his entire regular season and he kind of looked like a 6th, 7th round pick. So my grade on him kind of threaded the needle a little bit more there, where it's like, man, if he happens to be the guy he was in those last few games, as opposed to who he was during the regular season and the other 5 years of his college career, or 4 years rather, he's a 5th-year guy coming out. If that's who he is, he could be a starter in the league. So I like the dart throw in the 6th round there. And then you go to the 7th round, just a couple of traits-based kind of dart throws there. No problem with those, but as we know, many of these don't always work out. But these guys do have the traits. Carson Bruner was a 1-year starter at Washington, ran in the 4.5s. Someone to contribute on special teams while you see if he can develop. And then Dante Kent as well definitely had some traits that were intriguing to gamble on late in the draft there. Now, they did have, in my opinion, the 2nd best undrafted free agent pickup in all of the NFL in Sebastian Castro. Super smart, physical defender out of Iowa with 6 years of experience. He's played safety, he's played nickel. I could not believe the amount of Dante Kents of the world. No disrespect to Dante Kent, but there were so many of these guys that like weren't even combine invites, that just ran well at their pro day, and teams were just, it felt like just sorting by RAS and drafting in the 6th, 7th round. It's like, dude, Castro wasn't even that slow. He ran a 4.59. That can totally play as a safety or a nickel corner in the league. I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. I'm kind of predicting, frankly, that he starts in the nickel for the Pittsburgh Steelers as an undrafted pickup, which isn't crazy. We see undrafted nickels start in the league all the time, kind of like Beanie Bishop is for them. But I like Sebastian Castro more than that, and doesn't even have to change his color scheme coming over from Iowa. Overall, despite nitpicking the Yaya Black pick a little bit, I do give the Pittsburgh Steelers an A grade. Think they knocked this one out of the park. And this should be a team that Aaron Rodgers can get pretty excited about, I think, coming in and trying to win with this group and Mike Tomlin. And that is going to do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.